They gambled, which is probably very sinful, and I'm a Catholic, we can do anything. And I think Joe Boot won, or lost, so Joe, you're going first. Sir, you have half an hour from around now. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. And first, let me thank Josh and the organizing committee and Michael for moderating and Christopher for... Another sign. Right. Stop the clock. Can you start it again, Michael? Great. I want to thank Christopher as well for participating in this with me. We have spoken many times before, and I consider Christopher a friend. Now, I want to start by saying my only motivation for being here this evening is not publicity. It's not out of a desire to get my face on the university newspaper. I don't especially like debates very much. There are easier ways to make a living, I assure you. I'm only here because I believe that this issue is absolutely critical and fundamental to all of our lives, not just this life, but also the next. And therefore, that's my sole motivation for being here, out of a concern for this issue and for others. The question before us today is, does God exist, or at least is it rational and reasonable for us to believe that God exists? And I want to note it's important to remember we're not asking tonight whether you like God, or whether Christopher likes God, or whether we've got autobiographical commentary on what God has or has not done for us, or what we feel he should have done for us or he hasn't done for us. The question is God necessary to make our lives intelligible? Now, I must start by being honest. I'm a Christian. I can't hide from that. I can't pretend. I come to this subject in a neutral fashion. For the simple reason that neutrality in reasoning is impossible. We all come to this issue with pre-commitments. And my argument today essentially is that God is a necessary precondition for the intelligibility of our experience. The fact that there are non-theists here who are involved in this debate and listening to this debate, are participating in it, to my mind, already presupposes that God is, and that without God our lives are reduced to the absurd. Now, that's not to say that non-theists can't be rational or can't be moral. It's simply to say that my position tonight is that a non-theist being rational or being moral is contradictory to the extent that they are borrowing from my worldview. The non-theist must borrow from the theist worldview in order to have rationality and morality. In other words, I hold that the non-theist is intellectually schizophrenic. They want to have their cake and eat it. They want a rational world, and they want to do reasoning and logic and debates and be moral, but they don't want the only person who can ground those things, which is God. Now, we should all know that strict atheism is impossible. It's impossible because God might exist in a sphere beyond your immediate experience, beyond your immediate personal contact. Only an omnipresent person could know that God did not exist. And since only God is omnipresent, only God could know that God did not exist. That is why my opponent today normally identifies himself, unless you've changed recently, Christopher, as an ag-theist. An ag-theist. Now, it's important to ask at the outset, what type of evidence is relevant to this question? We don't use the same sorts of evidence to answer all different types of question. It depends on the thing we're investigating or exploring, depending on what philosophers call the ontological status of those things. For example, in one case of a countryman of mine, Richard Dawkins, who I'm sure is known to you, he thinks that believing in God is like believing in orbiting teapots or pink elephants. Now, some people think that asking the question, does God exist, is like saying, are there cookies in the jar? Well, let's all go and have a look and see if there are cookies in the jar. But this is a completely different kind of question to are there cookies in the jar questions. For example, I don't determine tonight whether Dr. DiCarlo's arguments are rational by going over there and splitting his head open with an axe, looking at his brain and saying, is this a rational brain? Because whether something is rational or not is not determined by an empirical physical inspection of the human brain. I hope he doesn't take offense of that. In the same way, I don't decide whether a piece of music is beautiful by putting a CD under a microscope and saying, can I quantify or qualify whether this music is beautiful by a microscopic inspection? If I want to discover the true nature of number, and there have been very different views of number, I don't collect all the fridge magnet numbers I possibly can from around the world and then identify their properties and say, now I can describe numbers. It's a very different type of question, and different types of argument are required. In the nature of the case, if God exists, he is the source of all rationality because he's the creator, the sustainer, and the governor of all things. So being irritated you don't find God in the physical universe is like being cross because when you open a play by William Shakespeare like Hamlet, William Shakespeare doesn't fall out the center of the book. Of course you don't find William Shakespeare in the middle of his play Hamlet. Furthermore, God is nothing like an orbiting teapot or a pink elephant. For a start off, I can look through a telescope and see whether there is an orbiting teapot. It's just one more thing in the physical universe. If God is, he is not one more thing in the physical universe. He is back of everything. So the critical question to ask is, what must be true about reality and God to allow our experience as human beings to be what it appears to be? Now, I want to suggest to you tonight that all of you have a divinity concept. All of you believe in a divinity concept of some kind. What do we mean by the divine? Well, we mean something that is non-dependent, incontingent, unconditioned. Now, for some people, that independent entity or reality is energy or matter, some sort of non-dependent reality. For me, as a Christian, that non-dependent reality is God. Now, the pagans believed in many gods, but that wasn't really their divinity concept because they believed that the gods themselves evolved from some sort of primeval watery chaos. So actually their concept of the divine was a naturalistic one. Now we all hold, each of us come to this tonight, all holding certain beliefs by which we seek to interpret the world. It's like a set of lenses. You believe certain things to view the world, to understand the world. Now our most basic or our most foundational beliefs cannot be proven directly. If they were, if they could be, they wouldn't be your most basic foundational beliefs. The thing you established them with would be your most basic foundational belief. If I said to you, God exists, and here's how I'm going to show directly God exists because of the following evidences, God wouldn't be my most foundational belief, would he? I believe that the universe is unintelligible without